Hi, I'm a higher ed CMO, and I have a confession to make. Well, I think that having a digital community and being really active on social media is a critical part of doing our jobs in marketing and communications. I haven't always had a direct strategy for how to do that. And when I did start to read the book written by the guest that we're going to have today and saw her talking about intentionality and authenticity, it made me shift how I approach social media from a personal branding perspective. And I have seen my follower count explode since doing that. And so I wanted to bring Josie on to have this conversation with everybody so you can kind of hear a little bit more about how to be a digital leader in higher education. Welcome to Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO, the podcast designed for higher education marketers. I'm your host, Jaime Hunt, and I am so excited to have this opportunity to share insights and inspiration. With Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO, I'm designing a different kind of podcasting experience. With each episode, I'll be bringing in a guest for a deep dive into the challenges and joys we all face in higher education marketing. After each episode, you can join the conversation on Twitter by using the hashtag HigherEdCMO. I would love to see this become like a book club, but for a podcast. And be sure to follow me on Twitter at JamieHuntIMC. That's JamieHuntIMC for more opportunities to connect. I'm so happy to be here today with Josie Ahlquist, author of Digital Leadership in Higher Education and a very popular and in-demand speaker and consultant. Hey, Josie, how are you?
Hi, Jaime. Thanks so much for the invitation.
I'm so excited to have you come on and talk with us about digital leadership. But before we jump into that, tell me a little bit about yourself and your journey that got you to this point.
Oh my gosh, so I was actually scrolling back a little bit, and it was 10 years ago this fall was my last fall move-in with like student leaders. I was on a campus.
Wow.
And I really this is honestly the time of year I miss it the most because it's just palpable, the energy. And especially this year, you can we're actually able to safely move in and do events and classes. So it was the next year that I actually was already in a doc program and just started to have my mind opening up to different ways that I could serve higher ed. And so I had a great advisor at the time say, well, we've got assistantships, you don't have to just work, and you could start to do some research. And honestly, that just kind of took off, full nerd alert. So I was getting my doctorate, and what my research was all about was how students were using social media. And then I also had this other passion of looking at how campus leaders were intentionally showing up. And this was 2012. And so, they weren't early adopters, but I just started to really see some differences both in front of and behind the screen. And so that led to me being asked to speak and starting to coach and consult behind the scenes, and many good trouble that I got into throughout the years.
So when you talk about digital leadership, what do you mean by that?
So it's an intentional approach to embrace yourself, no matter your position title, that you could make an impact online. Especially early days of my research, I would run into positional executive leaders that wouldn't believe leadership or influence or making an impact would be possible on a platform like Twitter. And I was like, well, you're already kind of set up for not a lot to happen with that perspective. Because I come from a leadership lens too. My bookcase behind me is full of leadership books. But none of them are you going to find how you would take, for example, servant leadership or authentic leadership. What does that look like on Instagram? And or is it even possible? So I just started to what I called remix leadership theories and tried to apply them to the digital space and where they fit, where they don't. Because also a lot of leadership theories were written by old white men researching mostly white college men that aren't applicable today. So many of them already need to be critically analyzed. And so then I started to look for trends, both asking leaders, like, well, what theories are you already drawn to? And then just seeing how they were making choices. Like the leaders I found early on, what I just absolutely loved was students were reacting positively. Like, oh my gosh, what a thing we need to celebrate is that, a vice president sharing like one post about how they took their dog to the vet, and then like 3 students the next day coming up to them asking them how Charlie is. And she never had met them before, but the dog was the welcome mat. It was the handshake that sometimes we just don't have, especially during COVID, in face-to-face or even sometimes an email interaction, that I said, there is something here. Like, we need to stop minimizing these platforms. I know they are problematic a lot, but if we actually are empowering both campus leaders as well as college students, how can you approach these tools differently? Maybe we actually have a fighting chance to make them a little better.
That is awesome. I worked at Winston-Salem State for a while for Elwood Robinson, who's the chancellor there, and he had a really active social media presence. And I think walking across campus with him was like every student knew who he was. Everybody wanted to have a selfie with him. They wanted to be featured on his social media. And that actually was really eye-opening for me in terms of thinking about how I am present on social media, and actually caused me to create a separate social media account for my professional self, and kind of mimic that. But there's a lot that goes into doing all of that. And why do you think that work is important? Why should we be thinking about having a social media presence as executives?
I mean, for a chief marketing officer to also say, like, you need to just take a step back and create your own strategy was the biggest gap in my research that I found. Even the most public presidents do not have a strategy or support behind them. And in any other area of their job, that just wouldn't, I'm not saying wouldn't be allowed, but wouldn't be ideal. And I'm not recommending that we go so extreme as that we have, ghost writers and like the account doesn't, like, some of my favorite accounts from campus leaders to follow, it is them. It's definitely them posting. But I do think part of leadership is self-awareness. You have to have some, like deep thoughts about what's your values, what's important to me. How do I want to show up in this world, whether if that's in an email, in a classroom, or on TikTok, and then start to make those choices. So that's why I realized, okay, I can go out and do speaking and workshops, but some of these leaders actually need a little, it's almost like therapy. Like, we're working through their fears, their frustrations, their perceptions about platforms, or, there's a generational thing too. Like, you don't want to look not professional or less than, but like your example, you can do some really simple things that can go such a long way. And again, what I am kind of trying to combat often is, especially the perception is, oh, you're looking unprofessional, or why are you, like pandering? But no, you're just being a person. We need students to feel like they belong. And I think some of our campus leaders can be key ingredients in belonging. Not the only thing, but why not try to elevate that a little bit more into the pot?
Yeah, I think that's such wisdom there. And it's to your point, it's another channel to be able to speak to students and speak to alumni or whatever your primary audience is. Right. What do you think leaders need to be thinking about if maybe they already have some presence on digital channels, but they want to kind of amp up and take it to the next level? What advice would you have?
Well, I think it's to again, look at these platforms just like any other strategy or way of being. Is just imagine if you could just have another layer of support. So I take photography a lot as an example because especially now that we're in person often, there are some times where grabbing a selfie or asking someone nearby to take a photo is actually probably going to be way cooler. But I guarantee there's probably like 3 experiences this week that are, it's going to be best for you to be like in the crowd, you're present, you're doing your thing. Strategize beforehand who's going to be the one taking the photos and then capturing it. Or my example a lot is I got my doctorate in education, not in English. So there's going to be typos in what I write. So who else can help copy edit your tweets or some other, like Instagram posts that could just kickstart you in order? Because the biggest thing I'm trying to work with leaders is consistency. And it's honestly pretty easy this time. Well, we're recording in August, so there's so much going on. You could probably post too much right now. But we know there's quieter times when you could potentially have some big gaps. So look who else in your core team. So this could be a grad student, a student, your executive assistant, your CMO, to think bigger strategies that could start to be integrated with some more strategic campaigns, even for the whole university.
Hey all, I hope you're enjoying this episode of Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO. I want to take a moment to thank my friends at MindPower who are making Season 2 of this Enrollify podcast possible. MindPower is a full-service marketing and branding firm celebrating nearly 30 years of needle-moving, thought-provoking, research-fueled creative and strategy. MindPower is woman-founded and owned, WBENC certified, nationally recognized, and serves the social sector, higher education, healthcare, nonprofits, and more. The MindPower team is made up of strategists, storytellers, and experienced creators. From market research to brand campaigns to recruitment to fundraising, the agency exists to empower clients, amplify brands, and help institutions find a strategic way forward. You can learn more about their work in the world by heading on over to MindPower Inc. That's MindPowerinc.com. And be sure to tell the crew that Jaime sent you their way. I think I like that idea of it being an integrative campaign with the whole university. Like that is, I think, critically important so that you're having that sort of unified, I don't know if presence is the right word, but that, or even message, but just that there's consistency there.
I mean, you probably have a different audience or a different lens than the main institutional accounts. I've seen some vice presidents or even provosts that, they have a higher influence online than the main account or even the president. So why not leverage their voice to help, get out whatever that main marketing plan is?
So when you in your book, you talk about using a values-based approach to leadership in digital spaces. Tell me a little bit more about that and why that's important.
So again, the challenge that I'm up against many times when I'm trying to present social media strategy and especially leadership online a little differently is sometimes these platforms can feel like busy work that we're just trying to keep up, that we're questioning if we really should be on tools. Those are just for the kids. And so I always want to get back to the bigger why. Like, what is your why for your life, for your position? Like, what's really calling at you? Because that's your values. So if I was to look at your Facebook, your Instagram, do I see your values even on the screen? And that could literally be your strategy, is these 5 values you always want to have show up, every week, every month. Like, and I wouldn't, maybe it's family or reading. Like, it doesn't have to be really complicated, because then that's going to start to like get you in the feels instead of just feeling like, okay, I need to force this. Because I do use language like authenticity in the book, which is obviously, as us and our identities are always evolving and changing, but we what we don't want, and I'm starting to see unfortunately more and more of, is a lot of robotic accounts for campus leaders because they have been a little bit swallowed up within marketing offices, that it starts to just feel like a department page rather than a person. Like to even debate, oh, what should their username, or can we own this account after they leave? Like, these are the wrong questions to be asking. Like,
Right.
this is a person, well, you can never guarantee your president's going to stay, right?
Right.
Let alone yourself. So it's an ingredient that the other goal within value space, it's personalized. It should feel true to them. It doesn't mean you're posting photos of your food unless, let's say, you're an amazing cook, or like me, maybe you had a really big fail in HelloFresh. And so that's going to be an interesting story to tell too.
When you're talking about those like robotic accounts, I'm thinking about the sort of the stereotypical thank you to X student org for inviting me to do X or Y. It was so great seeing this amazing group of students, and having just like a string of that and replace the X and Y with stuff. And
Right.
that, I think that can maybe seem like it's a formula, right? It's easy for people to do it that way. How do you get them to reframe how they think about what they're posting so that it has a little bit more intentionality to it?
I think the personalization, it comes out a little bit like, how do you normally talk? And also to know the language of the internet is different than an email. So, can emojis be involved? Or which emojis not to use to be involved. This is also why I'm a fan of visuals from a video or a photo that honestly says it for you. And might be why, for example, why you might want a coach to help cultivate some of that language, or to point out to you like, hey, all your posts this last week started with the word or ended with the, so
Yeah.
we want to add some variety. I also have an empathetic understanding of like, you are going back to back. And so again, like, what is your other support? Knowing that your account really does have a great amount of influence. And so someone else could maybe take that to a more personalized level.
There are some leaders that I follow that I love to see sort of how they blend their personal life in with their professional life. Is that a good idea, or is that something that we should be trying to avoid?
So it is the reason why I use the language personalization, because here's the reality is the internet doesn't care whether you have a lockdown Instagram account or you texted someone through a lockdown platform. Like, the internet is going to take it and run with it, right? So it's also why I teach a values base, is like, you need to live your life no matter if it's public or private. Now, I do think, again, through the leadership lens of self-awareness, you think through like, what are the elements of my life that I do want to share? And this is within even a privilege, identity, social justice lens, that some individuals in higher ed, sometimes based on position, can't share themselves. Like there is a huge risk for them to share certain elements of their lives. So we do have to acknowledge privilege and power, which also, when you kind of really dig into leadership, by definition, there's a lot of dialogue to be had there. So I would start with the lowest hanging fruit possible. So don't feel like, oh my gosh, am I going to share, like about my faith or my kids? What's your favorite movie right now? Like, what book did you just read? Jaime, I learned so many good books from you. I'm like, oh, I'm going to grab that one. Okay, she said that one's not so great. Puppies, like, yes, you should go and rescue a dog, because I am pro dog adoption. Or just get yourself around a dog. Like, so I don't want you to feel like you have to overcomplicate how you could add some personalization to your feed, rather than, again, feeling like it has to be more substantial of a reveal about yourself, because you do have to make some of your own choices. But like I shared at the very beginning, that example of a vice president, having to go to the emergency vet and sharing about it, the ROI was, now she met 3 new students who had never came up to her before because she just happened to share that post because they connected and worried about her dog.
You don't have to have a controversial viewpoint be how you're personalizing. One of the folks I follow, it's pictures of her grandbaby and how excited she is to see her grow. And, it's just kind of fun to see that kind of thing. So it you've talked a little bit about purpose-driven digital leadership, and that is in your tagline in your website. Tell me a little bit about what you mean by that.
I think it really pulls all the elements together that we've been talking about, really from the research and the framework that I teach is 5 guiding principles. Personalization is one of them. Legacy is another. That's basically that leadership ingredient, like what's the impact that you want to make. We talked about strategy. From what I have found, many leaders don't have it. And that's why we need to make a stand to say you need to have one. I don't need a built out calendar or that you've created posts for the next 2 months, but I do need you to have at least a couple goals and some tactics that you can track to know it's actually making a difference. And then we can take you to the next level with some analytics from there. The other element is change in the 5 guiding principles, and we've had to go through a heck of amount of change. And I know there's lots of research out there that some leaders just couldn't kick it and had a really, really hard time. These platforms, technology, social media, whatever it is going to change without our say. And to be able to not just kind of go with it, but to surround yourself with people like you, like me, like people on your campus that can help be your educators. Because I also don't need a president or a provost to be an expert on TikTok. That's not the best use of their time. Unless they're super passionate about it and are like, no, this is my jam. My kids at home have taught me. I'm ready to go. That's amazing. And then the last ingredient of purpose-driven digital leadership is really been the through line of my work since the beginning is I have always seen the possibilities for these platforms for connection and community, not just getting information across and promotion. And so I coach executives to have the intent to actually make a connection with another human, hopefully, not a robot on the other side of the screen. And then in higher ed, we want to see that as hopefully an in-person connection, an email. What's the ROI then that we could start to track to know that this is making a difference?
So you've talked a little bit about measurement and tracking and ROI. What kinds of things are you looking for when you're measuring that?
Well, I think it's actually a growing area for campus leaders. So of course you can track real basics like are your accounts growing? Are people actually responding? Just the same thing that we would look for in our, primary accounts. But we add layers onto that, which is, what's their next steps? Are they planning to stay in this presidency? Are they retire? How can we connect it back into their bigger life goals and then institutional goals too. So we talked about campaigns a little bit ago. How can we integrate and set your account up to also be part of these bigger strategies that the university is having? Maybe we know that this next fall, you are making an intentional effort to connect with a specific subset of alumni. That could be a goal that we have for your account. That's why we are going to double down on LinkedIn because we know that's a particular tool that we could maybe measure and put strategy together that's going to help find alumni that have left the campus.
One of the things that I have consistently heard from senior leaders and executives throughout my time in higher ed is fear that putting themselves out on social media will open them up to criticism. And I do know one leader, and I'm not going to say where it is just to kind of protect this person, but they were receiving threats against their children because of something that happened at the institution. And do you have any advice for leaders if they get into that type of situation or they have that type of concern?
Oh my gosh, it's hard. I I had just one slice of an experience where I was getting some harassment and my account was getting like duplicated a million times on Twitter. And it almost feels like someone is banging on your door or like has gotten into your house. Like it feels like they are there. So I want to acknowledge, for women and minoritized identities, we get it twice as much. And those are actually the leaders that I want to see even more out there. So that's where I also acknowledge like the risks that this does take, and to ensure that you've done everything in your due diligence to not only protect your accounts from ensuring you have your two-factor authentic, like some of these tools that we would already make sure that we would do for our institutional accounts, that they're protected. But also I've had some leaders that have someone else vet, for example, DMs, or they would see a comment first because, for example, let's say you are in a time of crisis on your campus, or a big announcement's coming out that's going to get some pushback. Maybe the best use of time for that leader isn't going to be getting this barrage of DMs or comments, but it is to do that town hall and to be able to fully show up in that Zoom meeting and in person. So someone else is going to keep an eye on those. So that's why I also think it's important, work with your vice president or chief marketing officer, like your executives, like who else can be support when things are not going great, and to notify the university to be a piece of the puzzle to ensure like, okay, I'm part of the brand and identity here, and I'm starting to receive, some of this stuff from the outside. This is also where I am encouraging everyone listening, not just if you are an executive, like this is my own life journey too, Jaime, is we need to learn to log off. Like leaders approach any tool with intention, and it is so darn easy to just not only to check email, but to get pulled back into these platforms. So then if anything, an extreme isn't going to result in our best. And so I'm trying to give leaders permission to set some of those guardrails so they can just, even in their own being, recover that technology, in excess can diminish that. So I'm integrating all kinds of more wellness work, whether if it's a workshop, we're going to do some deep breaths and box breathing, or, we need some more tools to take ourselves out of these tools. That can be a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I hear about people making threats against other people's families, it's like that's the dark side of digital community, but there's so many benefits, and I hate for that to scare people off, because I love the community that I have and the connections that I've made through social media, and I think it can be really, really transformative for your career as well, to be a visible member of whatever community you're in.
And I think the ideal, and I've seen this in more of the influencer space, or I mean, even, like very large public personas, is if you really do build an online community, they will come for you. They will, in the comments, like correct or call out those that are, like spreading misinformation or whatever it is. But also know that, platforms have some reporting things in place if you need to lock things down, like making those choices. And also, like in anything else, like file an official report. Like don't feel like just because it's happening in a private digital space that it's not real or that it's not serious. And so take measures as you absolutely need.
That's one thing. When I managed social media more directly, I was never afraid to take something to campus police if I perceived that there was a threat. Because at worst case, like absolute worst case scenario, somebody does something horrible, and if you knew or had an inkling that it's something that could happen, I feel like you have a responsibility to let police sort out whether that's a legitimate threat or not, and that you should pass that along.
Right.
You don't want to be the person that's like, oh, well, this person saw it and they didn't do anything. But to pivot to a little bit more pleasant thread of conversation, are there any people that you think are really good role models in this space And what are they doing that sets them apart in your mind?
Oh my gosh. So I have a whole list and I'll send you usernames and things. So that's the other element of the book. It's packed with examples. And I tried to get on a lot more photos than was approved by my publisher. Because I think, honestly, following like people that, and you almost like try them on. So you look at a president or a vice president and how they use Instagram, and you're like, okay, I like this part of their bio. That's interesting. They're posting this kind of theme. I'm not sure if that would fit with me. That's the nice thing about social, is you're trying to do this self-awareness, and then the other element of like, okay, what's congruence for me? What feels aligned? You can be inspired by what others are doing. So even on Twitter, I have a few different lists that you could quickly find, like all campus presidents that I've been able to find on Twitter, or vice presidents or women execs. So honestly, mine are full of personality. Like and when you think about capturing moments that can just jump off the screen, and I'm not saying they need to be like wild and kooky, but like you can just see emotion. And this is why skills like photography and videography aren't just something that you can like pick. Like it's a trained skill that, yes, maybe you need to teach that to your president, or that you have someone on your team that can do it. So Keith Carver, he's at UT Martin. He's on lots of platforms, in Kelly Damphouse at Texas State. They've got people just capturing all kinds of moments, whether they're in a golf cart or they're doing a dance on the quad, or just having a really solemn moment in their office. And I think the other element is storytelling. Like you said, you're not just posting and be like, thank you for inviting me to that. Like, you're explaining what meaningful thing happened. And that might be surprising to people listening. Like, no, you don't have to just write a sentence. It could be a longer copy, even on Twitter, if you turn it into a thread. I also love community college presidents, because you can just tell. I mean, I think so many leaders are here for just such good reasons, but there's just something, I think maybe because I grew up in Wyoming, and, you could just see their blood, sweat, and tears for these students. And so Mordecai Brownlee, he's at the Community College of Aurora. He also does a lot of interesting things with video. Daria Willis, she also is doing this Instagram interview in her office series. That's kind of like a podcast, but all on Instagram. And then Claudia Schrader, she's in the CUNY system, and she's just her posts are just so alive. Those last two are also on Peloton, so those I think that's just for me and another community that I have. There's also lots of provosts and vice presidents out there. My original research started in student affairs. That's kind of where I was baked and born and bred. So Melissa Shrivers from The Ohio State, Regina Hyatt from Mississippi State, Tim Miller from James Madison. And the biggest thing you're going to see is they are out and about, whether if that is capturing moments that happen online, or like literally out. And this is another lesson, is don't diminish even the simple moments that you have. Like, okay, someone brought in cookies. Like, okay, maybe then you explain like why chocolate chip is just like the bomb, or why oatmeal raisin is the worst thing ever. So I know, again, I'm explaining these things, and you're like, that isn't the work we do. We don't do cookie work. Yes, but but you should, maybe. Cookies are great. When you post stuff like that, you build community. So then when you do post the campus announcement that is going to be heartbreaking, or a change, or information, or something you need someone to actually do something with, you've hooked them. You've hooked them with cookies, and now you're going to get them to do the call for action. And then the last ones, some of my favorite vice presidents right now are in marketing, because not only people like you and Jenny Petty and Kin, you get the platforms, you get the tactics, and by role modeling your own learning and connection and community, I feel like you're elevating the whole industry. And so those, so I just have a few, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's more out there, and I'm always finding more. So folks can always send them to me, and I'm an easy follow.
One of my favorite presidents on Twitter is Tom Chesney at Clark
Oh,
University.
yes. Yep.
I love how he doesn't just post, he also interacts on other people's posts. Like you can see that it's not just a checkbox, like post this picture of whatever. It's engaging with the community beyond the initial post. And I just love that about him. And he's doing like those, his most recent or his pinned tweet right now is, a cup of coffee on his deck, being excited about students moving back. And it feels more authentic than some other more stilted, I guess, posts. What thoughts do you have about like engaging in that community versus just kind of having a sharing tactic?
I'm so glad you brought up Tom. I've done a couple like panels with him, and he's in the book too. And I think another ingredient, if you were to look at metrics, is not just what are they tweeting, but look in their replies to see, okay, what are they actually interacting back and not just in their own posts. Teresa Riley is another great one. She's at Arkansas Fort Smith, and doing it in a way as if you were really speaking, like in your language, not again like this kind of robotic message. So I think it honestly should be equal parts posting to equal parts, like interacting and listening even. A lot of leaders that I've interviewed talk about first thing in the morning, well, hopefully not the very first thing, but they will just social listen, and they will scroll, and they'll like search a hashtag or a tag location on Instagram to see what their community is up to. Like, it's not getting information just by what people are sending you in your email is not a representation of what's really been happening. And to not be scared of it. I think a lot of leaders are worried, well, I don't want to see what students have posted on TikTok or Instagram last night. And I can get that. And obviously, if you see some things you might need to say something, but also the growth of further understanding. And that's where, again, some interaction. Because I guarantee, like, if you were to reply to a student, you're going to make their day.
Oh, yeah.
Or just even to like a post that your main institutional accounts put out can really fill the cup of a social media manager to be like, oh, wow, my president or my provost saw this. And so, again, it doesn't have to be these grand gestures. It can be really simple ways to acknowledge people in the digital space.
It's so funny you say that about the excitement of being liked by the president. Our president at Miami had imposter account set up that was liking and following and engaging with a lot of people. And my husband and I both had multiple of the people that we're friends with on Twitter say, like, your president just followed me on Twitter, like all excited. Like, but it was like kind of this like, oh my gosh, the president is following me, or the president liked something I said. And then that person was the imposter was messaging about purchasing cryptocurrency. So that was probably a tip that it wasn't the real president. But yeah, that can really make a student's day.
Yeah, well, what a case study to actually see it work, even though it wasn't real. And that's the other element within the marketing office. Make sure you're grabbing up usernames and protecting that brand and keeping an eye out. I find some, and I let the president know, hey, just so you know, there's another Instagram account out there for you, and they're able to, put in a report.
And a lot of leaders, I think, would be eligible for the verified account status if they're posting regularly and they're at like a certain level, I would imagine. And I think that could help. That's something we've talked about, trying to get the president's account to be a verified account so that it's less likely that an imposter would be mistaken as the real thing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and also to know that it's happening in lots of different industries. Like this last summer, astrologers in that area, like, went under attack. Like, I guess all these, it's just so strange where people, and again, they're always trying to sell something, crypto, or like, I'll do a reading. And anyway, I'm letting you in on a little bit of woo-woo in my life.
That is very interesting. It's in... Like when you think about the spaces you're not in, what is going on in those spaces is also interesting. If somebody wants to dip their toe into this, what recommendations do you have? And I will make my first recommendation is that is Josie's book. But beyond that, what recommendations would you have, Josie?
I think, like I was sharing a number of leaders earlier, is just start to follow and pay attention to on just one platform. Don't feel like, okay, I got to get on all the things and I want to, like do a competitor analysis of all those elements. And then just start to try on and situate yourself like how you might see yourself doing something like that. And then seeing what's just the one platform that you feel like maybe you've got already some skills you would be interested into creating just a sliver of a strategy, and then set a goal. I'm going to post once a week on LinkedIn all semester, and hopefully it'll be like, just like the starter set that then you end up posting more. And then not just posting, but maybe the second post is going to be the interaction. And so hopefully we're going to build from there. Because what some leaders will do, they'll go all in, they'll be all active, and then they get burnt out or they get tired. So my goal is always to find strategy that's sustainable and scalable. So that means we need to build up to it. And then as we go, we're gonna get your own rhythm and pace, and hopefully get some wins too. So you start to see like, oh, I did not think this post would be so well received, or students would be this excited to take a selfie with me. Getting those wins as we go is just really, really a fun thing for me too.
It's fun to watch like goals be met and to see like, okay, yeah, this is moving forward, and it can take a while to build a following, but I've found that it's there's like a tipping point where you hit a point and then it just snowballs. More and more people have access to you, retweet you, like you, that puts you in front of more people and gives you a broader reach and opportunity to have influence. And something you said earlier really jumped out at me, the idea of sort of having a goal for what you're trying to do big picture. Like for me, it's, I want to elevate this profession that I work in and to help, do whatever I can do to encourage empathetic, compassionate leadership. So that's like, for me, that touch point has to keep going back to that. So I think, is that something somebody should kind of set up right away? Like, this is my ultimate big picture goal of why I'm doing this.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Just you saying it is like it gets you in the feels, right? It's right. What's going to call you back onto Twitter, not like, okay, I set a goal that I was going to post every day on Twitter. Is why is it going to matter that you were even on Twitter? Will it matter? And that's not to diminish you as a person or Twitter, but like whenever Twitter goes away or like whatever it continues on to be, what is it you want to know that you made an impact because you chose to be on that platform? And that's within strategy. You can start to look differently at each, like the way you show up on Facebook or Instagram, knowing people are in different places, and maybe the impact that you want to make is going to look a little bit different on those tools too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me personally, Facebook I try to have under 300 people on it. It's people I actually know, and it's my diary for all practical purposes. I love hitting the look at your memories and remembering stuff that happened a year ago. But Twitter is an entirely different thing for me, and I'm going to be dipping a toe into TikTok. And it's always how do you decide when does that platform hit critical mass that you need to kind of be thinking about having a presence there? Do you talk about that at all with the folks that you coach and consult with?
I mean, I think it's the same thing with protecting an overall brand is grab up a username. If you have, I'm always Josie Ahlquist everywhere. Not everywhere, just Josie Ahlquist. And so, yeah, I've on Be Real, I have my handle there just because that's ideally if I go on a new tool, I would hope that's what it would be. The other element to get on a tool early is for social listening. And that's how we learn is just observing, for example, TikTok or Be Real. Be Real notifications were driving me crazy though, and so I had to delete that app. But because those that we serve, not all of them, but do tend to be preteens, teens, and young adults who are statistically more likely to be early adopters on platforms that we are not. And so whether you're on them or you have other informants just giving you a heads up about what's coming, I do think is part of being a leader in higher ed, just like any other trend within our field.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that you talk about a lot is empathy. And how does that play a role in being a digital leader?
So the way I situate a lot of my keynotes is we do a walk through time. I was born in the 80s, Jaime. I don't know if when you were born, but I think about my early memories of tech and my first experiences with social media that would have been on desktop, right? And then I situate that with how old I was, or was I in high school, college, and the choices I did or didn't have to make because those technologies were or were not available. Like Josie on spring break my freshman year didn't have to worry about, a lot of technology pretty much. Today, young adults have to be hyper aware and are having to make choices. And sometimes those choices are made for them because they didn't even know a video was going on in the background. Because I get a lot of fear from adults and leaders about how youth use technology and how they're turning out, or maybe it's even newer professionals or younger professionals and how they're always on their phones. And so I always try to start with, like, would you be a college president if you had Twitter in college? I don't know. Or I don't know if I'd be doing what I'm doing if, I missed MySpace by a month. And so that's one level of empathy, right? And also why I wanted to study students is we don't ask them directly a lot. Like, do you actually love social? Like, or how do you feel when you go on these tools? And there is as much concern and resistance that we have, they experience it, yet there's a bit more peer pressure and performance elements, and that really is where they find community, yet we don't provide them a lot of positive coaching and empowerment around it. And so many times I'm getting in front of students with that empathetic lens to not just shame them, but to give them like, no, just tell me how I can fall asleep at night. Stop looking at TikTok before you go to bed. That is like a guarantee. And that's like a lesson of mine, right? Like, I need to move my phone physically away from my bed. And so empathy, though, doesn't mean, okay, we just kind of give over our souls to these tools. As leaders, we want to see which ones or any of them that are problematic, and then either for our own sake or for the people around us, set boundaries, push for policies, like know what these tools are and are not possible for. And yeah, again, at the end of the day, like we just need more. We need good humans, more good humans on these tools, no matter what position that you're in. I think we'll be better for it, no matter what industry you're talking about.
That's so true. I think because some people say things like, oh, Twitter's so toxic. And it's like, well, but not if you situate yourself in a circle of people that aren't that way. Certainly still bad things can happen, but I find it to be more life affirming than draining to be present on Twitter. So is there any reading out there beyond your book that you would recommend? I know you have a lot of blog posts around this topic. Anything else you can recommend for folks?
Oh, gosh. Well, it kind of goes back to another comment you shared earlier about the choice to be outspoken or speaking out about specific issues. There was an article that came out in the Chronicle about how less presidents are even wanting to talk to, for example, the Chronicle or journalists. And we also see this in social media, that is it worth to put myself out there or make this statement? And I mean, I feel like when you work in an industry like ours, based upon values-based decisions, there are things that are worth the pushback. We've also seen, though, like leaders having a statement about everything, right? It's almost like crying wolf. Like if you make a statement on everything, does anything really start to matter? What I hope, again, is like with a values-based strategy is it can become more clear when you need to really clearly make a stand. And again, I think that's where working with a marketing department will significantly help you there. As far as though other readings, again, I'm just going to push people to social media, like follow, what articles are they sharing? What are they posting? That's where you're going to learn the most because, just learn by watching and then get out there and get doing.
That is great advice. Get out there and get doing. I love that. So Josie, where can people find you? I know you said you're Josie Ahlquist on all platforms. And then what is your website address?
So it's just my name, josieahlquist.com. And you can email me at josie@josieahlquist.com. I do live in LA. If you're ever in town, please let me know. I'm not always here. But yeah, please find me on all the interwebs.
The series of tubes or whatever it was that senator many years ago said. And before we wrap up, I just want to say I'm looking at Josie's office and I can see in the background her books organized by rainbow color. And I just have to like do a fist bump because like everything in my life is organized by rainbow as well. Shirts, pants, dresses, everything. Like you're a kindred spirit, Josie.
Well, I am tickled that you noticed that. I actually just reorganized those yesterday, and maybe it was because I knew that we were talking. But because I kept looking at it, I was like, you know what? That would just be that'd be like the next level, right? Of yes. But I have done it to my clothes too. I just Marie Kondo my life. So I appreciate it. I'll take a photo that you can share.
Yeah, you might have to tweet about your rainbow bookshelf.
There you go.
Well, thank you, Josie. And for the listeners, please, you can always find me on Twitter at Jaime Hunt IMC, JaimeHunt IMC. I'm also on LinkedIn. My website is thehigheredcmo.com. If you want to have a conversation about this episode, use the hashtag HigherEdCMO. Join the conversation. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic. And until then, have a great rest of your day. Let's go bust some silos. And never forget, you are worthy. Have a great day.
Hey y'all, Zach here from Enrollify. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO with Jaime Hunt. If you like this episode, do us a huge favor and hit that follow and subscribe button below. Furthermore, if you've got just 2 minutes to spare, we would greatly appreciate you leaving a rating and a review of this show on Apple Podcasts. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, admissions, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks that are all designed to empower you to become a better higher ed professional. But Enrollify is far more than just a podcast network. Enrollify is where higher ed comes to learn new marketing skills, discover new products and services, and find their next job. We're a growing learning community of 4,000 members, and we'd love to welcome you into the fold. You can access our free blog articles, newsletters, e-courses, and more, or purchase our master course on how to market a university with Terry Flannery at enrollify.org. We look forward to meeting you soon and welcoming you into the community. Again, you can subscribe for free at enrollify.org.